Good afternoon already. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So welcome for our panel discussion that we will have. Our panel discussion will be about offtake, and I come to a minute on that. But for this panel, I will have four fantastic speakers. First of all, I have Itske Lulof. She's actually the sector head on energy and climate from Invest International. And so we will hear why they will or will not invest in projects for offtake. We will hear that in a minute. And then we have three off-takers. And the first off-taker was Madadh MacLaine. She's the Secretary General of the Zero Emission Ship Technology Association. Shipping needs hydrogen. Why don't we see them? We will hear that in a minute. And then we have Sjoerd Jenneskens. He's the Director of Sustainability Europe from OCI Global. OCI, I think we all know the company. A big off-taker, of course, for hydrogen, ammonia. We will hear why they don't sign in Europe contracts. I don't know. Well, let's hear it. And then, of course, we have Marcel Henneman. He's from Bunge. It's a new company, strong company, and they're also an off-taker. And they are desperate looking for hydrogen, but they cannot find. So, I have a question here on my audience here. Are there producers of hydrogen here in the audience? Please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I hope you're not the same company over there. So, okay, a future, okay. So you see, we still have a problem. I mean, this is an off-takers. They want to buy hydrogen, but still we have only one there and a few there. So we need more supply, probably. So, okay, let's immediately start. So a very straightforward question, and I will go first to Madadh. So, what is actually needed to sign contracts? Huh? So, because honestly, before you answer, if I talk to the producers of hydrogen, they tell me, I cannot find customers, where are they? And if I talk to them just now, they say, nobody is there, I cannot find any hydrogen. So what's the problem? Why can you not sign contracts?
So shipping's very specific. That we need a large amount of hydrogen at any one time, but in many different places at once. So we're an extremely challenging off-taker because we want, so the challenge, I think, and I think for this whole, to smash all of these eggs and create an omelette, we need all the stakeholders throughout the full supply chain to come to FID, to come to final investment decision at the same time, so that each one throughout, from renewable energy through to hydrogen production, through the infrastructure required to those vessel off-takers. And it's not just the vessel off-takers, because we need an ecosystem, so what we're calling hydrogen valleys. We need a full ecosystem, an off-taker ecosystem, where they're all ready to go at the same time. All reach FID together, all invest together, all produce, take, transport, all at once. And that's for me the ultimate solution. Is the ecosystem is finding a way to support all the different stakeholders throughout that ecosystem in reaching FID at the same time.
So actually what Europe is doing now, building these hydrogen valleys across Europe, is the right way forward.
Absolutely.
Great to hear. Oh, yes. Oh, Marcel, you're very eager to answer the question. Please, and also maybe you can say a few words about your company.
So I'm from Bunge. We're building a factory in the port of Amsterdam. We're a small off-taker potentially. And basically the challenge that the government gave us, and the port and the municipalities, to move away from natural gas. Natural gas is the current ecosystem for us to get energy. And they really want us to be as green as possible and move into either fully electrified or hydrogen. And then you ask, okay, hook up to the grid. Give us hydrogen. We're more than happy to support it. And then it's just not available. We cannot get it into our factory. We cannot get energy into our factory because the energy grid is fully utilized. And we cannot get hydrogen because there's no network yet. So as a consumer, we're just lost in translation here in the whole transition. And we're talking about a factory that will be there in 2 years' time. So there's still time to act. And what we were asking as well is, how can the industry accelerate? Because we all have very nice plans for 2028, 2029, But that's still very far away for us. That's a little bit our challenge as well.
Okay, so if somebody can deliver and help his solving his problem after the panel, there you go.
Yep.
The next off-taker is OCI, Marcel. Sjoerd, Sjoerd. So I learned that OCI is doing a lot of activity buying hydrogen outside of Europe,
Yes.
but not in Europe. Tell me, what's the problem with Europe?
Well, this is actually what's happening to us as well. We have large hydrogen production and consumption in the Netherlands. We are the largest hydrogen producer and consumer today. So if you would convert our both assets in the southern part of the Netherlands and in the north to hydrogen, you talk about 3 to 4 gigawatts of wind energy. So that's a lot. I think the issue we face, because as OCI, we actually are taking steps. We are investing. We have taken FID on quite some interesting projects, but it's not in the Netherlands, in Europe yet. It's happening in the United States, and it's happening in our Egyptian assets on existing infrastructure, in existing plants, where we have the confidence. We do have the infrastructure, we do have the electrons, we can make hydrogen, we can turn it into ammonia. And by the way, slowly but surely, we're also finding customers that might be willing to buy the ammonia at the right price point. The issue we have in Europe is chicken eggs.
Yes.
The main difference today is the cost of hydrogen in Europe versus elsewhere. The delta is so large that it's very difficult to take multi-million euro investments for the next 20 years on the current proposition that we get. And it's not only about the suppliers that are here in the audience, it's definitely also the government which has a great role in that. And the example is, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act of Joe Biden, which has created a big incentive for green hydrogen in the United States. So the focus today has shifted quite quickly after August 2022, which was really a paradigm shift towards the United States. And what we hope, we want to use our assets in Europe, that the focus will turn back again to Europe, but we need a powerful response of our European institutions to that.
Of course, we have the European Hydrogen Bank, but I will ask you the question in a minute. So, as an investor, I mean, here you have these off-takers. What is actually necessary to sign those contracts with them and to co-invest with them? Because they will need, obviously, money.
Yes, yes. I think what is needed is to really act together and to build that ecosystem. I think if you compare, for example, to the start of the renewable energy production generation and the whole beginning of that, also in that beginning, the costs were higher. So you need a group of first movers that build that ecosystem, that look for possibilities. So really the collaboration, I think that is very important. So I think we need a coalition of first movers, of willing, who are able to build these coalitions and to build the ecosystem. I think that besides Europe and besides maybe the countries that you mentioned, there may be other countries. I'm also still with one leg in the first day of the conference yesterday on Africa. I also think that there's a lot of needed also first movers who help to build up the ecosystem there and to make sure that also hydrogen can be first also produced and used locally to support the local ecosystem, but also to export to potentially also to Western Europe. So I think this ecosystem collaboration, and next to that we also need to de-risk projects. So because otherwise you have risk on risk on risk. So building that train of steps in the chain. So I think this de-risking, and for that it may be necessary to also have more blended finance available to really also finance the production. Mm-hmm. And I think also we need to look for floor prices that can be established so that at least you can make the business case for the producers. Mm-hmm. And then at least some floor and a cap. I think that's also part of the solution that we need to sign offtake contracts. So within this range, a floor and a cap, a floor price and a cap price to at least see, okay, this is how we can make a first business case.
Sjoerd, you wanted to react on that?
I fully agree with the value chain and the let's say the cross value chain collaboration. And this could be one way to kind of kickstart the hydrogen economy. But we have to remember that most of the times hydrogen is not consumed as hydrogen, unless you want to use it in a car or in a truck. But hydrogen is here all around us. It's in the molecules that we use in our daily lives. And in the end, it's also in the food that we eat via the nutrients that we as OCI supply to the market. So another way to look at how could you incentivize the system is to create also an end consumer pool for green products that have been manufactured with green hydrogen. And we have seen great examples from the biofuel market, where the government has mandated the end user, us all together, when we go to the gas station and go pumping our gasoline, that a certain part of the gasoline needs to be a biofuel or a low carbon fuel. This is a great example where you create a kickstart, a value chain, and a willingness to pay a slightly higher price for a greener product. And we would like to see this in more end markets. We would like to see this in the materials market, in the chemicals market, and the fertilizer market as well, where you'd say a certain part of the nutrients that go to farmland contain green hydrogen. And in the end, it's not the farmer that has to pay for it, it's us in the supermarket, when we buy our lower carbon products, that pay a slight premium, and that way you can kickstart the value chain from the back.
Okay.
I think
Yes, please, Marcel.
as nutrients, I fully agree with you, and I think we're already doing that. But if we really want to use hydrogen as energy source, which I think it's mostly hydrogen is being discussed as replacing fossil fuels. So if you want to be first mover, how do we create level playing field versus all the other industries? Because we still need to be able to compete as well with our next door, who is still on natural gas or whatsoever. And if you ask me what we need to have in a contract is a way to leverage against the energy market and find also ways with incentive programs to make it affordable from a start. I think as soon as we start with the whole transition, it will get there, but we need to start somewhere with indeed the first movers. But how do we ensure there's also the proper incentives from a government perspective?
Yeah. So the role of the government seems to be still very important. Madeleine, when we talk about, the shipping, so we see today not yet really signing contracts to offtake the hydrogen for several reasons that you mentioned, and you said, okay, we need to create that ecosystem. But for example, we have a lot of green shipping corridors announcements all over the world. I mean, if you open Google and you type in green shipping corridors, you get a bunch. But these are all PowerPoints, you know. So when can we see a real green shipping corridor, and what is really necessary to, how can we create that ecosystem better or maybe even faster? How can we accelerate that ecosystem?
So, no, absolutely, Bart. And I think that, going back to my my previous statement about creating the ecosystems, for those green corridors to kick off, we actually need ecosystems at either end of the corridor. So your hydrogen valleys, so to speak. And honestly, it does come back to governmental regulation. And I'm dealing with, shipping, it's an international industry. So when you talk about international, regulation, it's the International Maritime Organization. But the International Maritime Organization, it's made up of countries. And at the end of the day, for this to get kick-started, it is countries and regions that need to be putting in the incentives and the regulation, so the carrot and the stick, so to speak, to create these ecosystems. And there's got to be a leveling of the playing field by regulation coming in. That's going to charge you to pollute, whatever that is, whatever you want to call it. It's just got to be. Well, there's a carbon tax. That's a bit of a misnomer because we're talking about different kinds of emissions. It's not just carbon, but an emissions tax on one hand, and then incentivizing the investment and the uptake on the other hand. And I think that's really. So after having that global view of being able, looking at it, incentivizing the whole ecosystem, it's the government needs to come in and take a strong step in creating that environment, just as you're saying, where you know what your levelized cost of hydrogen is going to be. And until you know what the levelized cost of hydrogen is going to be, you can't make that investment. When all of that's set up, then we will start to see these corridors actually being implemented.
Very good, very good. I mean, on the on the supply side here, if the producers of hydrogen, I will ask you a question in a minute. So, and also I give you the opportunity to ask your questions to them because you want to sell your hydrogen. So maybe you want to ask them why they don't come to you. So prepare your questions. Huh? So I have another question to my panelists is about, and I will start with you, Itske. So how can we really come to a financial close to projects? I mean, what is really necessary?
To come to financial close?
Yeah, to make it bankable. I mean, I hear, of course, a lot. I mean, the government needs to finance. The government needs to finance. Yeah, of course. I mean, always the government needs to finance. I mean, they don't have endless amount of money. So are there other things that we can do to come to a financial close than only ask government money?
Well, to come to financial close, you need, on the one hand, a project that has acceptable risks. And on the other hand, you need to know at what price you will sell the volume for what quality. So I think that's important to have. And I think that the price at this moment in time is still a bit, in development. So I think that's, and therefore, I think what we could start working with is this a kind of at least a cap and a floor. A discussion so that you can at least structure your production based on this floor price. So that at least could help. With regard to if you are not acting in a chain where one party is active in the whole chain, so if you really go from one stage, so renewable energy production and then conversion to the production electrolyzers to hydrogen, maybe into another product, then the shipping or the transportation, and then maybe back into hydrogen or other products. So then you have a risk in from each and every phase. You do have a risk. Yeah. So it's important that, especially in the beginning, that you have this ecosystem so that you have these parties working together to come from A to Z and to have that. So I do agree that it's not easy. But I do think that this collaboration is really necessary.
So collaboration, and I want to, exactly, Marcel. I wanted to come to you because you said that basically you cannot get hydrogen. But if you would set up a consortium, a coalition of the willing, and you told me earlier on that you bring people together, you have around the table, you try to build that kind of working together, but it doesn't work. You said at the end. Why doesn't it work?
I think, first of all, I think the industry is still trying to find each other to get all these different teams together. So you need to do
a team building.
Yes. And we had some sessions with the Port of Amsterdam and the Oram, and I think with very good people together, but probably not yet the right people, so I think it's good to be here. But I do challenge that idea of a floor, and I think the floor is very attractive for all the producers. But if I look at the global S&Ds on energy, if hydrogen is going to play for some time, at some stage, natural gas and just conventional oil will become cheaper. How do you leverage the level playing field for us as a consumer then? Because if you make the floor happen and all the others stay to natural gas, we will just become more expensive.
Itske, please.
I think that for that you need the regulatory framework. So if all producers are being asked to produce green hydrogen, so based on renewable sources, or maybe in the beginning phase based on fossil fuel, but then with carbon sequestration, so then you have at least a level playing field of all parties having to move in that direction. So you will never be able to fall back on fossil fuels for the 100%. So I think you need the stick and the carrot, but regulatory framework, of course, is
I like more the carrot, but
Yeah, but also the stick.
missed
I
the
think.
stick.
Yeah.
If the stick is well implemented, it can make sense. So a very good
Yes.
example is the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism in Europe. We're very supportive of that. If it gets implemented well, this can really help to. It's all about the externalities of the products that we make that are not priced in. So if you start to really price them in, it will incentivize the system. And what we, the question was, how do you come to financial closure? What we as OCI do, we are an existing player, and we are an integrated company, and we are a global company. So on the projects that we have already taken FID in Texas, it's a 1.1 million ton blue, really low carbon ammonia plant, and in Egypt, a 100 megawatt green ammonia plant, is that we say, hey, we have the infrastructure in place, we have the electrons, we can make the molecules, we can feed them into our plants, we can ship it, and by the way, we also have the global system to take it in Europe into our own operations. And by the way, if we happen to find a customer that's willing to embark with us in this value chain approach and is able to pay the higher price for the green molecules, then we can also help the customer. Yeah. So this is how we start. But if you need to start from scratch at your part in the value chain, it's very difficult, because what you see then is everybody tries to transfer risk to the next part of the value chain and then the next one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I think it is necessary to just start also doing. And for example, we as Invest International, we are involved, for example, in Namibia from the very first step. So really from scratch, and really also offering grant money to set up the whole infrastructure. So really the public infrastructure. So also to allow for that hydrogen market to develop in Namibia. So that's what we do with support of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I think it's that type of investments are also really needed to build the infrastructure.
Yeah. So maybe are there questions from in the room here? Questions, especially I would like to hear from the suppliers of hydrogen. Why don't you supply it to them? They need your hydrogen. So, somebody? I mean, I saw there were 3 over there. So, yeah, here we have one person. He will be a future supplier, he said. So, I'm interested to hear.
Future supplier. We're working on a process to split methane into carbon and hydrogen, so no emission. Nevertheless, we run into the problem that all the customers say we need a green product. We don't need a zero emission product. We need a green product. And we're in the USA with the IRA. It's perfect. We can go there, make a lot of money. But in Europe, they don't want it. They don't want the zero emission. How do you look at that? You opened something with maybe in the beginning we need blue hydrogen. But would you be open for that kind of hydrogen? It's not green, but it's zero emission.
So OCI, please.
I'm fully on your side. So we need to be holistic and not dogmatic. We don't have time to be dogmatic, to say we only need one solution. It really depends on the industry where you're in, where your asset is, but also your, I would say, political preference of your country, whether you would allow one low carbon or renewable energy source over the other. So I leave that to the politicians and the societal debate. But we don't have the luxury of being dogmatic and choosing only one option, which is then called green. So as OCI, we look to invest in low carbon, zero carbon, and green. And when we do low carbon blue, we make sure it's CO2 sequestration. So the CO2 is really gone. But for instance, our Beaumont project, we go at least 70% decarbonization, up to 95% decarbonization, which is really high. So, and zero is even better. Yeah,
It's better.
Okay, but I think Europe is also allowing low carbon hydrogen. Huh? So, sorry? Not yet. No. Blue hydrogen and low carbon is allowed. Is allowed, and so. But of course, if the customer asks for green, I mean, the customer is always right. That's what we say, no? So, Marcel, I mean, you look only to green hydrogen, just or are you fine with low carbon?
I would be in the same boat as Sjoerd. Let's start pragmatic. I think over time the consumer will tell how green it should be, but that's a different point. it starts with just being able to just get it affordable, and if we're not even there yet, that whole transition to green hydrogen is another one. Building on that, yes, the direction is as green as possible, and we also need to consider the low emission when we use it, and that's then looking at the technology at being used, because if we now use basically the natural gas in our boilers, we need a whole installation to keep it also clean for the environment. So the better concentrate hydrogen is, and without all kinds of side emissions, the better it is for us.
Interesting.
So, for the shipping, any comments on that?
Well, on a vessel, so this is really interesting, because in terms of on a vessel, it's an international industry. You're in international waters. You're under international regulations, and we have questions on this in the International Maritime Organization. Do we look at the upstream, or when is it our responsibility, and when is it the responsibility of the countries? And I personally, my personal standpoint is that if when it's produced within a country, the responsibility, those emissions are the responsibility of that country. The regulations and the certification of the hydrogen is then the responsibility of the country. As soon as you put hydrogen into your bunkers on your vessel and use it in your hydrogen fuel cell, that hydrogen fuel cell doesn't care where that hydrogen comes from. And I personally don't think it's the responsibility of the ship owner or the charter who's bunkering their vessel to be responsible for the upstream footprint of that hydrogen. Not that it's not important. Of course, it's extremely important. But the responsibility for that lies elsewhere, and it lies with the countries themselves, not with the vessels.
Okay. Other question? Oh, yeah. Now we get some reactions. Okay. Yes, please.
Great panel. So my question is more about bankability. So there has to be an offtake for sure, but it's got to be somewhat of a firm offtake, contracted for a period of time, so that a financer will say, yes, my money goes in.
I can sign for 50 years.
I want to sign for 15 years, so...
Maybe just if you could comment on the bankability aspect of not just an offtake, but a firm offtake over a contracted period of time to give the financiers confidence to make the project happen.
Yeah,
Well,
our investor.
indeed, usually 15 years would be a period where you could find financing. Again, also here we need to see, how they say that, we need to define different scenario analysis, but usually 15 years, so should be a period which is of interest, I guess. So then you can really do something, yes. Yeah.
Any comments? I mean, for example, OCI, I mean, what are you want to sign long-term contracts, or are you a bit worried?
Depends on the market, but this is also a bit thinking from the old school perspective, investments in oil and gas. We've done it for the last 60 to 80 years, where you would have an LNG project and a 20-year offtake, and you would go and done. But this is a new world we're entering in with a lot of uncertainties, and also a lot of I would say opportunity risk. When you choose the wrong pathway, you could be in trouble. So what we need also is towards the financiers and the institutions and us taking the investment decisions, more flexibility on this 15-year frame. It's very risky. So we also try to think across the value chain, how can we come to closer, to shorter financing terms in order to alleviate that risk. And for example, we sell our product to farmers. Well, it's really not about 15 years. It's about, will it rain next week, and what will my crop do? So they take really short-term decisions, which we have to take upon us as a hydrogen and fertilizer producer.
Yeah.
I see.
So it's the same thing in the shipping industry. Most vessels do it, they tramp, which means they go from port to port, and they bunker where it's cheapest. And so in terms of, for most of the shipping industry, long-term fuel contracts aren't really an option, which is why we're encouraging, as a Zero Emission Ship Technology Association, we're encouraging the focus on smaller vessels, smaller return to base vessels, offshore energy vessels, and particularly offshore renewable energy vessels, because there you've got your renewable energy supply, and this is a place where we can actually build an ecosystem where we've got the technology for the hydrogen on use on board these size of vessels, and we can also see building that hydrogen supply ecosystem, in the same area. And so building the ecosystem until we have enough off-takers and a large enough, sure enough offtake to support the tramping vessels.
Okay, and unfortunately this panel is already over. I mean, the 30 minutes passed. But what I remember now from this panel is that we need to work more closer together. All the parties need to sit together, otherwise Marcel will never get his project off the ground. Very important. But also, I think you guys here, and girls, you should sign maybe or think about longer offtake contracts, because the suppliers of hydrogen, they want to sign 15 years. So let's think about how we can find each other maybe in the middle. And finally, I see also the infrastructure. For some reasons, we have still problems for infrastructure, but by working together, it should work. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Bart.